Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Well, social media is great in many ways. It's been with us since well, the birth of Facebook has been with us roughly around 2008. There was other types of social media before that. A lot of benefits, a lot of pluses, but there are some negatives. And we're going to look at that a little deeper from an ethical standpoint. He's somebody that has studied ethics for a good portion of his life, also has researched it, and also has taught it for many years. And he's back with us. Ronald Berenbeim joins us on the program. Welcome back. How are
Hi,
you?
Steve. Hi, Steve.
It's
Good
good
to
to have
see
you
you.
back. Yeah. And this I wrestle with this. It's so ironic. We call it social media, but in a lot of ways, it isn't social. It breaks a lot of people apart or causes some challenges. What aspect of all of this are we going to look at today?
Well, we're going to look at the hearings that I think were on February 1st, where Mark Zuckerberg appeared before, I think it was the Senate Judiciary Committee. And we're going to talk about the background of social media, not in a scientific term, but in historical terms. And then we're going to analyze it within our ethical frame and talk about how we can make things better, not perfect. That's not what ethics does, but make things better.
Hmm. Now, when you talk about historically, I believe you're referring to going back to way before social media existed, but way before even TV existed, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the social part is the important part. The media is just a method. And sometimes new methods improve things in certain ways, make them worse in certain ways. Sometimes they make them just worse. They never make them just better. So I'm going to, put social media and the development. We had different kinds of social media. We've always had it. People have always talked to one another in groups uh, within an American historical frame. And then we'll analyze it within our uh, analytic frame, which is, uh, you know, Benthamite utilitarianism, greatest good for the greatest number, that's markets. Then we have law, and of course, that's what this hearing was all about. And then finally, we have ethics, which I think points the way forward.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this journey where we're starting about the social side and even your thoughts about the hearings with the Senate Judiciary Committee, Meta, and Zuckerberg. So, how far back do you want to begin?
Well, I would start, at least if you're in the United States, with the American Constitutional Convention and a widely circulated story about what happened there. When Benjamin Franklin, one of the founders, one of the framers, emerged from the meeting, uh, somebody in the group that was surrounding the meeting room in Independence Hall yelled at him, "What kind of country have you given us, Ben?" And Franklin replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." And in many different ways, as we have seen, even in the last 48 hours, in very dramatic fashion, uh, keeping it is the job, and always will be so, as often was the case. Franklin proved to be something of a uh, prophet. Now, when he left that hall, I think when he was talking about keeping it, what was on his mind was slavery and, the persistence of slavery, how long it whether it would continue and in what form, whether the country could exist half slave and half free, and so on. But Franklin was also one of the most, if not the most, technologically sophisticated of the founders, and he knew all sorts of things about what technology and science could provide in the way of advances or challenges. But at the time when he left Independence Hall, slavery was sort of in decline, and many people expected it. Well, knowledgeable people, at least some, thought it would die a natural death because the southern cotton planters were losing their market to India, and it was becoming less and less profitable to grow cotton, and that was the crop and the enterprise on which slavery depended. However, in 1793, a young graduate of Yale, I'm glad to say, so I'm not responsible for him in any way, named Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin. And things changed dramatically. The U.S. recovered its share of cotton and increased it. It suddenly became profitable for people to buy land as far west as Texas and as far north as Tennessee, put it under cultivation, establish plantations, buy and sell slaves. And so slavery continued without much interruption. It at least survived, and the United States politically, as Franklin had intimated, would be consumed over the issue of whether or not new states to the Union would be admitted slave or free till about 1860. And with the election of Lincoln in 1860, matters came to a head. And Lincoln summarized the matter in what was billed as the few brief remarks that he was going to give after the main address, which was delivered by Edward Everett. I believe that was his name, and which went on for about 2.5 hours. Then up came Lincoln, and as people were shuffling around, many people in the audience didn't even hear him, I suspect. But what he said was, 87 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. Well, 17 years earlier, in 1846, a French visitor, Alexis de Tocqueville, offered a somewhat contrasting view. In Democracy in America, he depicted a country of towns and cities in which all citizens were members of interlocking institutions, granges, local militias, schools, town meetings, that showed the potential for self-governance. Flash forward to the early 2000s with, as you said, the launch of Facebook, which was in 2008, and some of its predecessors even earlier than that. And you have the potential for a global enterprise, a cosmopolitan global Tocquevillian version of democracy on planet Earth, consisting of interlocking, what is it, the NYU Facebook, rather the NYU Facebook, the NYU website, the Columbia, so on. And all of these interlocking, but all of them also self-governing in the Tocquevillian way, with anybody who wanted to making their own contribution in their own way. But what happened with the technology that was used for Facebook and for the internet that we have now had an opportunity to see? Overall reduced attention span in young people who grew up without anything else. When I was young, people used to complain that that was something that television was doing, and it probably did, but nowhere near to the same extent. You couldn't take televisions around with you into class and read them while the teacher was trying to give a lecture, which people routinely do, as I can attest firsthand in classrooms. And this gave rise to reduced attention spans, poor test scores because people were learning less, cyber stalking and bullying in general has become more common because children have fewer opportunities to develop socially in direct interaction with one another. So we're losing our capacity for what the Greeks called moral attention, which is a precondition for empathy. In such a state, there is a danger of self-isolation that reinforces our own beliefs. And to shore them up defensively, competitively, we use social media. So on January 31st, 2024, not so long ago, Mark Zuckerberg of Meta and 4 senior executives of other high-tech firms appeared before a Senate Judiciary Committee. The audience was filled with parents whose children had been victims, in some cases even fatally, of cyberbullying, sexual trafficking, and drug abuse. And that was attributed to platform use. This hearing was not the first response to a recent development. Meta executives had appeared 33 times since 2017 over issues such as election interference and the January 6th storming of the Capitol. Dozens of bills had been introduced, but none had passed. In this case, however, there was a bipartisan consensus, quite possibly because the issues raised concerned children, that something needed to be done. The tech executives acknowledged as much, and at least in one case, Snapchat, support the Kids Online Safety Act that retracts data collection, monitors data collection on children, and tighter parental control on social media. 3 days later, on February 2nd, Meta announced its latest quarterly report. Profits had tripled. The stock rose 20% on this news, the highest increase in Meta stock since it became a stock company, I think. The company announced that for the first time in its history, it will pay a quarterly dividend. The company did not describe in this annual report investments in new products and services that reflected what one might call newly gained moral attention. Instead, it announced a $50 billion stock buyback plan. Now, who gives a stock buyback plan benefit? It obviously benefits shareholders because with fewer shares in circulation, price goes up. And executives who have, shareholder plans and top senior executives. Now, I completed these remarks and sent them in to you yesterday, but you should read the newspaper every day. Today's New York Times reported that Nick Clegg, Meta's president for global affairs, who I think was once head of the British Liberal Party, proposed at Davos AI tech standards and for monitoring and so on. Now, that's just a small part of it, but it's one area where Meta is willing to take the lead.
On the back end, there have been substantial changes ever since those issues that we're talking about in terms of Facebook. Even if you want to place advertising on Facebook now, the scrutiny is huge, especially when it comes to political advertising. You have to go through, because I'm deeper on the marketing side as well. You have to go through so many hoops, validation. You even have to show a passport, driver's license, all of that just to place political ads, even if you're placing them on the behalf of somebody else, let's say a candidate. And Facebook, and this is years ago, you can target in terms of ads. They don't even allow you to target household income, where Google, you can very easily. So a lot of the things I think were in a positive direction, even to the point if you had a cosmetic surgeon and you wanted to put before and after photos up, and I'm talking about tasteful photos before and after, it will get rejected by Facebook and Instagram because they view it as you're looking at somebody in a negative way, being the before. That's how careful they are. So I believe a lot of this, it took a while for us to get there, but I believe a lot of it, in a positive light. And certainly with Snapchat and the Online Safety Act. But look at that. It worked in their in their favor in terms of profits, right?
Well, it obviously didn't. I mean, they did just as well. They did just as well with with that. How could they have done any better if they hadn't had that? So it seems like, and Nick Clegg is kind of acknowledging as much at Davos when he proposes we take this further. Why not? Why not impose upon his competitors the same limitations that he imposes on himself? So that, yes, absolutely. But we're left with the stubborn fact that the usage of this particular kind of technology, even with the best intentions, has diminished attention span, has has made test scores lower, has widened inequality because as far as general wealth, there's no question there's more of it than there was, considerably more of it. But
And by the way, I can't disagree with you on any of those points. I'm right there with you. And let's add to that a mental health crisis for teenage girls in the United States, probably
yeah,
also Canada, to the point where suicide rates or the thought of suicide, let's go there, is at about 50% right now in teenage girls. Why is that? My personal feeling, underlying a lot of it has to do with social media. There's just no getting around it.
no
They're
getting
comparing
on.
themselves. Right. It's there. And Zuckerberg, even during that hearing, apologized to families for things that may have happened in their family because of Facebook and Instagram. And he says, I wish it was another way, and I'm very sorry.
And
I
he was
guess,
surrounded by them. The attendees at this hearing were filled with people holding up pictures of
yeah.
dead or injured children. And, so this is, he acknowledged it was a problem. uh, but I don't know, what in the way of product development and so on. Certainly artificial intelligence so that you can't have somebody ranting on and everybody thinking it's Joe Biden when it's artificial, artificially
Right.
manufactured.
Well, look at,
But
did you see recently while we're talking about, public figures, artificially generated, George Carlin,
yeah,
somebody took his voice, allegedly using artificial intelligence, wrote comedy, alleged comedy, uh, and created a 1 hour video special. The images were images of news feeds or just photos of things that he was talking about, and it went horribly wrong. Yes, they got a lot of this particular website got a lot of views. The video, YouTube, a lot of views, but in a negative way. And it just shows that, AI isn't that perfect. I loved George Carlin. Genius. Genius.
course, yes. What are
This
the seven naughty words or something that
Ironically, yeah, seven naughty words that you can't say on TV. One of his famous bits from the mid 70s, maybe the early 70s, maybe 72, 73. However, the skit that these two guys did wasn't even funny. I would even cut him a little bit of slack if the content was kind of funny and the inflections were maybe closer to George Carlin. It was garbage. So much that they took it down because George Carlin's daughter is now suing, is now suing. And they had a cease and desist and the thing went down.
but they're losses. And you got all sorts of things like anorexia from young women and so
100%.
on resulting from this and apparently I think you could talk about this as much as I could, but so now let's look real quickly at taking our frame and seeing what we can do about it. First of all, in terms of Benthamite utilitarianism, there's no question. Well, there's the greatest good for the greatest number. Well, the greatest good may not result in the greatest number. And that's the one thing you were kind of learning from this. We've got, global membership, global communication, instant this, instant that. And we've spent some time and could spend considerably more about the victims and, the widening chasm between the beneficiaries and people who do not benefit from it and people who are actually harmed. Now, law. Law was what this meeting was all about. These hearings are supposed to, we sometimes have to wonder in this day and age when we see them on television, but the purpose of these committee inquiries are to develop ideas, to identify problems, and to develop laws and regulations that will address them. And since 2017, there have been 30, this was the 33rd meeting, and they're still trying to figure out a way to address it or such means
Right.
as they have used.
It's become, and we're just about out of time here. It's become such a behemoth beast that it's almost hard to control. I think it's out of control. Great thoughts today, and I never thought of looking back on the social aspect back to even the 1700s to get us up to that Judiciary Senate committee with Facebook and Zuckerberg. So interesting ethical view of all of this, Ronald. Somebody wants to reach out to you, has a question, wants to pick your brain about something, anything that we talked about today, how do they find you?
Well, it's Ronald.Berenbeim, Berenbeim at gmail.com. And let me just add that we haven't gone through the ethical issues, and we don't have time today, so maybe that'd be a good thing to think about for the next session.
Yeah, I would love that. Or even if just touch upon it and then move to another topic. But fascinating way of looking at it, and appreciate all of it. Thank you for being here today.
Welcome. Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.